الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا ربنا بما علمتنا وزدنا من كرمك علما يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم طهر قلوبنا وأزل عيوبنا وتولنا بالحسنى وزينا بالتقوى واجمع لنا خيري الآخرة والأولى وارزقنا طاعتك ما أبقيتنا يا رحمن يا رحيم. اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم وعلمنا بالحلم وزينا بالعلم واجعلنا من الذين يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين واجعلنا من المتقربين إليك على علم وهدى وبصيرة يا فتاح يا عليم. وصل وسلم وبارك وأنعم على سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Ameen. Alhamdulillah, by the ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His karam and His fadl upon us, we'll continue with the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah subhanahu wa ta'ala wa nafa'ana bih. Inshallah ta'ala, today we'll begin the 15th hadith. Al-Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah subhanahu wa ta'ala narrates through an unbroken chain of narration to Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu wa ardah. Abu Hurairah, Abdul Rahman ibn Sakhar, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت ومن كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليكرم جاره ومن كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليكرم ضيفه. رواه البخاري ومسلم. Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu wa ardahu narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said, من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. So the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever believes in Allah and the last day, then he should, or let him only say that which is khair, that which is good, or let him remain silent. When the Prophet ﷺ said, من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر, whoever believes in Allah and the last day, then do, what he is saying is that the following action is a sign of true belief in Allah and the last day. In other words, belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the last day demands the following behavior. So the following behavior is the behavior of the people who believe. This is the behavior demonstrated by them. Opposite to that behavior is not the behavior of people who truly believe in Allah and the last day. So when the Prophet ﷺ is saying this, he's trying to say this is the behavior that must accompany your belief. If you're not behaving in the following way, then you're not representing what you say that you believe in. It's like seeing a policeman. If we hold policemen to a higher standard of behavior, and then you see a police and he running the red lights, going above speed limits, throwing garbage on the road, and you go to him, you will say, are you a policeman? Yeah. Well, if you are, then behave like one. Why? Why are we saying that? Because right now your behavior is not appropriate behavior for somebody who we hold to be somebody who upkeeps the law. So that's what the Prophet ﷺ is doing here. When he said, من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر, you believe in Allah on the last day, then the following behavior is what you have to demonstrate. Why didn't he continue? Why didn't he say, if you believe on Allah and the last day, in the angels and the prophets and the books and qadar? Why did he say Allah and the last day? For two reasons. Because what he's going to say is related to the commands or the requests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when he said, Man kana yu'minu billah, is it, do you believe in Allah? What do you believe about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You see, if the Prophet ﷺ is addressing the people, and he was to ask them, if you were to phrase this hadith in a different way, and he said, do you believe in Allah? What does that mean, belief in Allah? Believe that He exists? Believe that He is God? Part of believing that He is God is that He has the sole right to dictate how we behave. So it's like saying, do you believe that Allah is the Shari'? Allah is the one with the sole right to legislate your behavior. Yes. If so, following is some of the behavior that He legislated for you. Last day. Do you believe in the last day? Yeah. What is it about the last day? What do we believe about the last day? The last day is the day of Hisab. That's the day in which our actions will be judged by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is the day in which your actions will appear in the scales, and you will see the good of it and you will see the bad of it. And you will see the good, yani has consequences in the akhirah, and the bad has consequences in the akhirah. So do you believe that Allah can tell you how to behave? Yes. Do you believe that how you behave in this world has consequences in the akhirah? Yes. If that's the case, then the following are some behaviors that you must have. So he says, Man kana yu'minu billah. Whoever believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the last day, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. Then let him say that which is good. Let him say that which is good. Or remain silent. These are the options. The options is, if you're going to, is you remain silent or you don't, or you speak. If you speak, you only have one option as somebody who believes in Allah on the last day. What is that option? That you say something that which is good. Otherwise, don't speak at all. So this is what the Prophet ﷺ is saying. What is khair? When he says, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا. The opposite of khair is shar. The opposite of good is bad. So when there's an amr, when there's a command to do X, the command is also a prohibition from doing the opposite. There is a principle in usul al-fiqh. Al-amru bi-shay nahyun an diddihi. A command for something is a prohibition against its opposite. So when the Prophet ﷺ said, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا, this is a command. Say that which is good. We can rephrase that and say what? Do not say that which is bad. So what is good? Or if we ask the question, what is, in order to know good, we must know what is bad. This is also a principle in the Sharia. Yani, وَبِالْأَضْدَادِ تُعْرَفُ الْأَشْيَاءُ. You see, by the opposites, things are known. How do we know what is good? We can know what is good by knowing what is bad. So, the prohibition here is, do not say that which is bad. How do we know what is bad? Anything the Sharia says is haram. So, man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day, do not say anything that is haram. And do not say anything that is makruh. Because it's also from shar. The commands of Allah Azza wa Jal, the commands of the lawmaker, is either requests to do or not to do. The commands of the Quran and the Sunnah are commands to either do something, or it's a prohibition against doing something. Do or don't do. The command to do and the command not to do can either be jazim or non-jazim. Jazim means it can be declarative, 100% serious, firm, do something. Or it can be non-declarative. The declarative commands of Allah to do are called wajibat. These are the things that you must do. You cannot leave them off. You have to do them. The commands of Allah Azza wa Jal, that is not declaratively to do, but is telling you to do, those are mustahab. You should do them. The wajib you must do. You cannot leave them off, except when the Sharia gives you an excuse. The commands that are not jazim, you should do. You can leave them off without an excuse. But it's better to do them. These are the mustahab. Same thing applies to the commands not to do. The commands not to do, if they are jazim, if they're declarative, then it's haram. You cannot do them. If it's non-jazim, then you shouldn't do them. Not that you cannot, you shouldn't. If you do them, it's not haram, but you should still avoid them because the Sharia asks you to avoid them. And then there's a fifth category called mubah. Mubah is when the Sharia didn't ask you to do it, nor asked you not to do it. There's no command either way. There's no request either way. There's no request to do and there's no request not to do. In other words, the Sharia is permitting you to do it if you want, but it's not asking you to do it. So if you want to do it, do it. That's optional. Because we're not telling you to do it, we're not also telling you not to do it. So when the Prophet ﷺ said, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا, say that which is good, it covers two categories, for sure. It covers the wajibat. Say what you must say. In other words, there's no option not to say the things that you have to say. What are some of the things that we have to say? Example, in salah, we have to recite al-Fatiha. That's a wajib from the wajibat of salah. We have to recite the tashahhud in the final sitting of the prayer. That's a wajib. There's no option not to say it. There are other cases where you need to do amr bil ma'roof. For example, to command good, sometimes it's wajib. There's no option not to. To save a life, you have to. Even if you're in salah, if you're praying salah and you see like a child is gonna touch something like an electric outlet and get electrocuted, there's no option to say, oh, I'm in salah, I leave. You have to break the prayer to say something to the child. Yeah? So there are times where you have to say something, it's wajib. And then other times, it's mustahab. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying, when the option is to speak, then yakul khayran. Only say that which is wajib, only say that which is mustahab. And yasmut, otherwise stay silent. Especially, yani, don't ever say something haram, don't say anything makruh. What about the fifth category, mubah? Where do we place that? Is it permissible to say mubah things? Is it, in other words, included in the phrase of the Prophet ﷺ, khayran? When he said, فَلْيَقُلْ khayran, say khayr. So we know for sure it covers wajibat and mustahab. Does it cover the mubah things? So here there's a difference of opinion among the ulama. So where there's agreement is where it concerns haram, makruh, don't say. Wajib, mustahab, say. What about the mubah things? The ulama differ here. So some of them say it will fall under the category of khair. If we were to separate all human actions into khair and shar, good and bad, then the mubah falls under good. Why? Because the only thing that would make it bad is if the Sharia made it bad. And the only thing that the Sharia made bad are things that are haram and things that are makruh, not things that are mubah. Things that are mubah cannot be described as being bad. Because that judgment, bad, when it relates to rewards and when it relates to blame, can only be determined by Sharia. So if the Sharia didn't determine to be bad by saying it's haram or makruh, then it falls under the other category, which is good. So when the Prophet ﷺ said, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا, speak that which is good, yani say that which is wajib. Say that which is mustahab and say that which is mubah. But never find yourself as somebody who believes in Allah and the last day saying something that is haram or makruh. So the mubah falls under good according to some of the ulama. Because the verse of the Quran that says, وَمَا يَلْفِظُ مِنْ قَوْلٍ إِلَّا لَدَيْهِ رَقِيبٌ عَتِيدٌ, that no human being utters a single word except that it is recorded by the angels. Those who record the good deeds and those who record the bad deeds. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, one of the mufassirun from the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the mubah is excluded in that ayah. ما يلفظ من قول إلا لديه رقيب عتيد. Raqib and Atid are the angels that record the good deeds and the bad deeds. So the good will be the wajib and the mustahab. The bad will be the haram and the makruh. So according to Ibn Abbas, the mubah things are not recorded, because they have no consequence in the akhirah. There's no reward or there's no punishment related to them, so they're not recorded. So if they're not recorded, then it doesn't fall under khair or shar. But according to others, as long as it's not shar, it's khair. So that's where the difference of opinion comes from. So, من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. When the command says أو ليصمت in the hadith, it is understood that we remain silent only when silence is khair, only when silence is good. But if we remain silent when silence is bad, then this is not what is spoken about in the hadith. Because sometimes silence is bad. If you see somebody doing something wrong and you remain silent, then that silence is not khair. That silence is wrong. Because amr bil ma'roof wa nahyu anil munkar is wajib according to the sharia. To prevent bad and to command good is wajib according to the sharia. Except in their conditions, except if you fear harm for yourself or for your family or for your wealth. If you know you're going to tell somebody something and you're going to get into a fight and shed blood, then it's better not to tell anybody anything. And neither do it. If something is a difference of opinion, then you have no obligation to correct it. If something is wrong according to your madhab, not wrong according to other madhabs, and you see somebody doing it, you have no obligation to correct them. Because you only correct things if it is wrong by the agreement of the ulama. Or if you know the person is following a madhab in which it is wrong in that particular issue. Because they might be Shafi'i, but following the Hanafi school in a particular issue, you don't know. So if you know they're following the Shafi'i school in an issue that is wrong, then you correct them. Anyway, the idea is sometimes silence is not khair. Sometimes silence is bad. So when the Prophet ﷺ said, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ, it is understood that be silent here means if silence is good, or if silence is better than speaking. But if not, then you are commanded to speak. So, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. Now, one of the things that we must also understand here is when the Prophet ﷺ is commanding silence here, he's not commanding it as an independent act of worship. Silence is not an act of worship. So when he said remain silent, he's not saying silence here is an act of worship unto itself. He's saying you remain silent here because you have nothing good to say. But nobody can say we're going to be silent for today from Fajr until Maghrib as an act of ibadah to Allah. This doesn't exist in our Sharia. Some Sufi groups, they do this. They take vows of silence. Vows of silence are bid'ah. It's not a part of the religion. There's no act of ibadah called silence. So, when the Prophet ﷺ said, أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ, that's simply because you have nothing good to say. Not because silence is an independent act of worship unto itself. Because somebody is being silent, not saying, but he's thinking a lot of stupid things in his mind, he's not doing anything khair. He's not in a state that is religiously acceptable. Because your thoughts still matter, right? But silence to reflect. So when they say, for example, the Prophet ﷺ is described as having long lengths of silence. Because he used to reflect. The silence is to reflect. The silence is to be dhikr. The silence is to be thinking about things that enhance your spiritual states or your intellectual state or your emotional state. It's not silence for the sake of being silent. Also, it is makruh to be silent for no reason for an entire day, according to the Shafi'i school. At least say something. Don't go silent for an entire day. At least say something to somebody. Even if it's answering salam, giving salam, something. Ask somebody about something. Speak to a child. Because speaking to children, engaging children is mustahab. On their level. Not like, if you see them doing things, ask about what they're doing. Stuff like that. Right? There's that. All of this is extracted from the hadith of the little bird. Ya Aba Umayr ma fa'al al-Nughayr. When the Prophet ﷺ went to visit Anas, and Anas's little brother, his pet bird, died. And the Prophet ﷺ was asking what happened to the bird, stuff like that. Anyway, so silence is not an act of worship, and it's makruh to be silent for an entire day for no reason. And silence here, all of this, what we're talking about, is silence with the ability to speak. But if somebody doesn't have the ability to speak, they're not covered under what we're talking about. Or if somebody needs to be silent for medical reason, your doctor tells you can't speak at all, you have some jaw issue, you can't move it, that's not what we're talking about. Silence, if somebody fears speaking would lead to harm, and by harm, not an irrational fear, if they believe that really and truly there's a threat to their physical being, or their wealth, or their honor, then it's better not to speak. Then silence is, in this case, better. They have to weigh the harms, and they have to act based on what is demanded by the lesser of the two harms. Also a principle in the Sharia. So you work with the least harm. So if the harm to the society is more than the harm to one's family, then speaking and bearing the harm to the least amount of people that's what you're supposed to do. Yeah. So this is why, for example, speaking against governments and stuff like that, if there's a fear, you don't do it. Even, the command about speaking kalimat haqq, a true word in the face of an oppressive leader, that is when you don't fear your life, or you don't fear a greater repercussion. That's what it's talking about. Not if you have fear of your life, fear of other people's life, fear of losing your wealth, fear of having your honor destroyed, like these people are going to go in a smear campaign, stuff like that. That's not when this rule is applicable. It's applicable when you don't have those fears, according to the Sharia. So, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. Imam Shafi'i radiallahu anhu, he said that before a person speaks, he should think about it. What am I going to say? And then think about what am I achieving by saying it. So first of all, think about the hukum. So Imam Shafi'i said, something comes to your mind, you want to say, think about the hukum. Is it wajib? And the rest of the ahkam, haram, mubah, mustahab. And then you do what is necessary based on the ruling. And then after you think about the ruling, think about the consequence. Even if it's wajib, then you have to say. If it's mustahab, if it's makruh, think about the consequence next. If I say it, what is it going to lead to? In the dunya or the akhirah? And then only when it checks those boxes, like in terms of the hukum, when it's not haram or makruh, and then in terms of consequence, if it leads to good, then after that, if you want to say it, say it. But always, anything you want to say, think about these two things before you say it. So Imam Shafi'i radiallahu anhu is saying two things. Think about the content that you want to say. The content, the thing itself, is it permissible, first of all? And then think about the context. It might be permissible, but this might not be the context for it. This might not be the place, might not be the time, might not be the audience, might not be... So you have to consider everything, not just it's not haram. So think about both of them, content and context. Because Ibn Abbas has a statement, he said, to say something to people who are not the people of it is wrong. You're oppressing them. And to not say something to the people who are the people of it is wrong, you're oppressing them. So something might be correct, something might be right, but you're saying to the people who are not the audience. They're not the people, so then you're the one doing something wrong. You can't go about complaining, these stupid people can't listen to what I'm saying. You're the one, you're oppressing them. What is oppression? Dhulm is to place something in other than its context, other than its place. So who's doing the wrong thing? Are they doing the wrong thing for not understanding what you were saying? Or you doing the wrong thing to place something in a place that is not, where it does not belong? You are the one. So, and to not say something to the people who are deserving of that thing is also an oppression to them. So the hadith is emphasizing an important principle in Islamic spirituality. Every tariqah from the turuq of Sufiya, every way that we have, with all the differences, there are certain principles that everybody agree on. All the turuq agree on. One of the spiritual principles that all turuq agree on is that it is harmful for the spirit, for the iman of a person to be speaking a lot. Constant speech is harmful to spirituality. And long silences is helpful to spirituality. The least amount of good that comes from not speaking, the least amount of good that comes from it, is that people can blame you for saying things. That's the least of the benefit you get from it. When everybody's saying things and getting in trouble, you won't get in trouble for saying something. That's the least. So after all is done and people are going to look back and say, who said what? You said nothing. So you're not going to be. And the least amount of harm that comes from saying is regret. So the least benefit of not saying things is that you save yourself a lot of trouble. The least harm that comes from speaking is regret. That's the least. From then it goes higher, the regret. Because Imam Ali said, I've never regretted something I didn't say. But I've regretted a lot of things that I have said. So it's rare to regret silence. But it's very, very, very common to regret the things you say. If you think about just from the time you woke up to now, I'm sure you'll find 3 or 4 things we already regret saying. And it's not even noon as yet. Right? Much of you think about yesterday. How many times you sit down and think about things you said in your teens? It's like, if only I could have slapped myself. Hey, don't just stay silent. And constant speech is harmful. It's harmful for the iman. There's even a hadith. Imam Ahmad in his Musnad narrated a hadith from Anas that the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يستقيم إيمان عبد حتى يستقيم قلبه. The belief, the iman of a person wouldn't be straight until his heart is straight. ولا يستقيم قلبه حتى يستقيم لسانه. And his heart will never be straight until his tongue is straight. So in other words, the straightness of the tongue, meaning the control over the tongue, is something necessary for the straightness of the heart. Straightness means mustaqim. And in order for the heart, if the heart is mustaqim, then iman will be mustaqim. So non-control, any lack of control of the tongue, the impact of that goes all the way to a person's iman. Because we can say something that is a kalima of kufr that can affect our iman without even realizing it. That's why even the Prophet ﷺ taught the ummah a dua that he used to make. He said, Oh Allah, protect me. Oh, I seek refuge from committing shirk knowingly. And I seek your forgiveness for ever committing shirk unknowingly. Why say unknowingly? Because you might say something that is a word of kufr and didn't even think about it. So these kind of things happens a lot. We might say something that on the scales of the akhirah is heavy without even thinking about it. And then we forget that we said it. We never make tawbah for it. But in the scales, heavy. There's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that a servant of Allah may say something that he didn't think about. And it raises him so high in the sight of Allah Azza wa Jal. He didn't think about it, he just said something. And at the same time, a servant may say something that he doesn't think about, that drops him so low in the sight of Allah that he didn't even think about it. So guard the tongue. Don't say things that are not necessary. This is why Imam Shafi'i is saying, think about everything you say. Think before you say. So that you're never slipping according to this hadith. You're never falling in the category of people who they say something without thinking about it. That's why you think about everything you want before you say it. Because the tongue, there's that hadith, the famous Sahih hadith of Mu'adh ibn Jabal. When he asked for advice and the Prophet ﷺ held his tongue. The Prophet ﷺ held his own tongue and said, guard this. And Mu'adh said, we will be questioned for the things our tongues say. And the Prophet ﷺ said, your mother has lost you, O Mu'adh. That's just an expression the Arabs had to say that, to express, like, yeah, of course, sure. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, what else will cause people to be dragged on their faces on Yawm al-Qiyamah? Because of hasa'idi al-sinatihim. Because of the things they said and they didn't think about it. When the ulama say that one of the keys, some of the ulama say the key, miftah, kull khair, the key to every good is good company. And the key to every bad is bad company. This is what they mean. Because all of this come into that, right? The type of conversations you have will be determined by the type of people you associate with. And if you're in the company of people who think about what they speak, or they only speak about good things, and then those conversations you're talking about, you have less risk. But if you're in the company of people who, they don't think about what they talk about, then you'll fall into that conversation. Even if you don't say anything, to participate is haram. To participate is haram. Just be in the company. So, so guarding the tongue, and being very, 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 very careful of the tongue. That's why the ulama, they say that they say that the person who could control his tongue, the Muslim who can control his tongue, is better than the Muslim who is a mujahid or murabit fi sabilillah. Murabit, somebody who guards the forts of the Muslim cities. Mujahid, everybody knows who a mujahid is. They say the Muslim who can control the tongue is better, is higher in status than the people engaged in ribat. Because this one is harder. Physical training, to fight and to be a soldier, physical training is easier than spiritual training. Some of the turuq Sufiya, the first principle they have is controlling the tongue. If you don't control the tongue, you don't move on in your spiritual training. Because they know if you can't control that, then it's going to destroy everything else that you've built spiritually. You might build something, and then your words destroy everything that you've been building. So in order not to go through this vicious cycle of building, breaking, they train you to control the things that will destroy your good deeds. And that is, the number one thing is the tongue. The Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith that slandering burns away good deeds the way fire burns away wood. So you may have a mountain of good deeds. If you haven't controlled the tongue, you'll be burning it up just by backbiting, just by slandering, just by speaking about things without ilm. One of the problems, I don't know if it's specific to today or has always been a human problem, but one of the major problems of the tongue is people speaking without ilm, without knowledge. And we're not talking about religious knowledge. In general, people speak without ilm all the time. When people speak about politics, 90% is not with any knowledge. When they speak about economics, 100% of them just ignorance. People give other people medical advice. Somebody has, I have a headache, hey, just drink this bush with that thing and then spin around 10 times. Why? Because I read an article on no ilm. No ilm whatsoever. And when it comes to people's body, remember the body of a Muslim is sacred. The body of a Muslim is sacred. So if you tell them take medicine, you have no medical training, and it caused harm to their body, is that sinful? That's sinful. So your tongue did it. You just said something, but because of what you said, a Muslim felt pain or had a medical problem. You're not qualified. So that's harm that your tongue is doing. So these are all the things that the afat, the dangers of the tongue are many. In the books of tasawwuf, the ulama detail like 20 of the dangers of the tongue. To stay, just be very careful of the tongue. That's why the Prophet ﷺ is emphasizing this. And he says, Man kana yu'minu billah. If you believe in Allah. That's why he's attaching it to that belief. You believe in Allah, then yeah. You believe in Yawm al-Akhir, then control that. Control that little thing, the tongue. Maybe we can go on. There's so much about the tongue. The Prophet ﷺ said, if you guarantee me that you can guard the tongue, then I can guarantee you Jannah. That's how important, that's how dangerous the tongue is.
For example, now in the social media, when we read those comments, does that mean we participate? Although we don't comment anything, but we read those comments, does that amount to participate into that?
No.
We're just reading it. I mean,
if you just come across it, it comes across your feed, you read it, and you move on. That's okay.
But if you participate,
Yeah.
one another, the other person is commenting, and you comment, and you keep commenting.
Yeah. And you share it to somebody else, and you bring somebody else on the thread, then that's participating. Yeah. No.
Okay, just to read through.
Yeah, that will be equivalent to just hearing something. A group of people backbiting, you pass by, you hear what they say, and you move on. That will be like that. You didn't participate. You didn't stop to listen. There's a difference between listening and hearing in the Sharia. The Sharia, especially in Shafi'i fiqh, there's a separation between listening and hearing in many rulings of the Sharia. For example, sajda of tilawa. Is it only applicable to those who listened to the verse or those who heard the verse? Keeping silent in the Jumu'ah if you're hearing the khutbah, is it applicable to everybody who hears it or only for those who are listening to it? Stuff like that. I mean, there's a difference between hearing backbiting or wrong things and actively listening to the wrong things. So what you mentioned will be equivalent to just hearing it. So I just saw it. There's no way I could have not seen it. But now when you stop, read, bring in other people, throw in then you're participating. There's a lot of things you see online, you just have to remain silent. Even religious things. Yeah.
Are you obliged to correct them?
Yeah. You are obliged to correct, but with all of the other conditions that come with Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahyu anil Munkar. And there are some of the ulama who believe that all of the things related to Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahyu anil Munkar, they believe that it don't apply today. There's a lot of the ulama who believe that. And that's based on a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, if you see certain things, then leave leave the public and only focus on your people, meaning yourself and the people related to you, your children, your parents, and whoever would listen to you. So the Prophet ﷺ said, when you see, I can't remember some of the things that he mentioned. When you see, Allahumma salli ala nabi. He mentioned 3 signs in a hadith, if you see them. One of them is there will be wickedness that you can't ward off from yourself. There will be haram things that there's no way you cannot participate. Like riba and stuff like that. You have to. As long as you have the money, you're involved in riba. As long as you have to have insurance or you'll get arrested and stuff like that. So when you see that time comes, the Prophet said, leave the public. In other words, forget about Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahyu anil Munkar. Leave the public and focus on yourself. There's one hadith where he told Hudhaifa, take your sheep and go into the jungles and live off of the roots of the trees. In other words, just completely disparticipate in society, in civic living. Just go live by yourself in a place where you don't have to deal with the people. If you feel comfortable, if you feel that you can reply and there's no harm in doing so, you can correct without any harm coming back to you, then do it. If not, leave it alone. Also, you have to also consider the general context. Not only that specific thing. The general context meaning, should people be, number one, bringing religious debates to places like Facebook and Twitter and those kind of places? Is it the place? If it is the place, then how do we determine who we should reply to, who we shouldn't reply to? There's a lot to think about. We don't know the audience. It's to a general audience. Anybody can read it. We don't know the level of understanding of the people. We don't know the level of if they're even real people. We don't even know if they're Muslims or pretend Muslims. There's a lot. We don't know if they have any background. So most people that are commenting on religious things have no background in religious sciences. So if you actually start the debate, somebody comes in and start a debate, like with principles, like a real alim who studied for a long time, and he's coming debating, proper debate, and on the other end of it's just somebody who doesn't know Al-Fatiha typing. You don't debate with people like that. So you got to ask yourself if it's even worth it. Or are we causing more harm? That's the question. So I'm not giving an answer to that question, but that's a question that must be considered even before we start debating on social platforms. Are we causing more damage? So we might correct and set one person straight. Are we causing harm to the hundreds who are reading the whole debate? So we might make some leeway with that guy. We might correct him. He might come around on whatever. He might accept the truth. What is happening to the other 100, 200, 300 that are going to read that? Remember the debate between Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Harith al-Muhasibi. Al-Harith al-Muhasibi wrote some works on kalam. Ilm al-kalam, coming into the Muslim world at that time, interaction between the Muslims and the Greeks started making its way to the Muslim world. Harith al-Muhasibi started writing some books to refute some of the ideas that were spreading. Ahmad ibn Hanbal was upset with him for that. Now, the two of them had a conversation, or there's a conversation between the two that is reported, that Ahmad confronted Al-Harith. Say, why are you writing these books? Al-Harith says to him that these ideas have to be rejected. So I'm mentioning these wrong ideas and I'm correcting them. Ahmad ibn Hanbal said, but in refuting these ideas, you are reproducing the ideas. You're putting them in your books and then you're refuting them. What if somebody read the book, get infatuated by the idea that you put there but is not convinced by your reply? Then what happens? You now end up spreading the wrong idea that you meant to correct initially. So instead of being an agent of correcting what is wrong, you've now become an agent of spreading an idea that is wrong. We're not saying Ahmad ibn Hanbal was right. We're just looking at least it's something to consider, something to think about. That might be some. So we might put something that's correct and win the argument against one person, but we don't know if we now set up something wrong for 100 other people now. So that's why if we don't have the proper context for debate, we don't have the proper context to correct something, we don't have a proper teaching environment, then maybe teaching is not the appropriate thing to do in that place. It's like, if you know those Muslims who go all over the place and start to lecture? They're Muslims, especially in the West, and they go anywhere and they want to teach people. So like they go to a park and there are Muslims there with their families and their kids trying to have a good holiday in, like a one day off, and these guys show up with their tasbih and their books and they start. You don't go to a park. You don't go to a park where people are in the mode of relaxing and playing. They have their balls and they have their kids and they have their stroll. Why do you think they're at a park? Yeah, do you think they went to the park thinking, those people woke up and decided as a family, you know what, let's get some durus in today. How are we going to, let's go to the park and see what we can find to teach us. They didn't think that. That wasn't what they were thinking. So it's not the place, it's not the time, it's not the context. You just don't come up. So you might be teaching what is correct, you might be absolutely great. You might be one of the best alim alive. فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا. So the Prophet ﷺ said, to speak that which is good or remain silent. One of the things that must be talked about, when we talk about this hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ remain silent and not speak too much, part of speaking too much that is not beneficial is constant lecturing and a lot of khutbahs. That is not good speech. That falls under the category of bad speech when it becomes constant. Especially if the speaker is not an alim or is an alim but loves to speak. If we can detect that somebody loves to speak and give speeches, we should prevent the person from doing speeches. As long as you can detect, oh, this guy loves it, he loves the audience, he loves giving a talk, he loves lecturing, stop him from lecturing. That's our duty to that person. And the Muslims are supposed to look out for each other, right? The Muslims are supposed to protect each other from harm. Harm can be physical, it can be spiritual. Spiritual harm is to develop love of audience, love of taqaddum, to be in front of other people and have them. All of this, that's a love, and it's harmful to the spiritual well-being. If we detect it in a person, it is our duty, out of love for that Muslim, that we stop him from speaking. It's like the people who love leadership. Love for leadership, the Prophet ﷺ said, don't give it to them. If somebody loves leadership, don't give it to them. So, if somebody is not an alim, should not be speaking at all to people on matters of religion. If he is an alim but he loves to speak, loves the audience, and there are others who can replace him, then he should not be given the opportunity to speak. If there's nobody to replace him, then we have to. There's no other way. You have to give them to speak. And if speech becomes constant and too much, then it is not good. It should be limited. This is why the Prophet ﷺ didn't give a lot of khutbahs. And when he did, it was short. Right? Because constant speaking is not good. And the Prophet, and the third condition is that when the content of the speech is less about ilm and it's more about stories and inspiration. Inspirational speeches and storytelling should be limited. The Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith that now, he was speaking to the companions, and he told them, now that the time that you're living in is a time كَثُرَ فِيهِ الْفُقَهَاء وَقَلَّلَ فِيهِ الْخُطَبَاء. You're living in a time where there's a lot of fuqaha, people who understand the religion, people of fiqh. And there's not many khutaba, speakers. But, and the Prophet ﷺ warned the companions, I said, a time will come, قَلَّلَ فِيهِ الْفُقَهَاء وَكَثُرَ فِيهِ الْخُطَبَاء. A time will come when the fuqaha will be a small number, but the khutaba will be a large number. You'll find a lot of people speaking, but you would only find very few people who really understand the fiqh of the religion. He said, be grateful that you're living in the first time, and seek protection that you ever witnessed the last time, the second one. We're living now in the second time, where out of, maybe you can go across 100 speakers, and all 100 of them are non-fuqaha. You find people with no training in fiqh, none. Not even like, oh, they covered a first book, none, zero. And they're given khutbahs every Friday. And they do it well and charismatic and eloquent, and so then they move off of the Friday khutbah scene, and they're now giving lectures in the nights, and then they have their own series, and then they have their own YouTube channel, and then they're at universities, and then they're invited to other countries. And then next thing you know, within a year or two, they've given lectures in 400 countries. I mean, this kind of... If you ask them how to make wudu, they got it wrong. If you ask how to pray, they get it wrong. You have to give zakat, they get it wrong. If you ask how to do hajj, they get it wrong. If you ask about sales and they say, oh, we didn't even know sales is part of the Sharia. So that also falls under the part of the hadith that said, أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. All of these speaking and stuff, it's not khair. And if it's not khair, what is the other option? In the hadith, stay silent. Don't give all of these speeches. And the early ulama used to say that Fudayl ibn Iyad, when Fudayl ibn Iyad said that the shaykh that you should follow is the one who speaks less. Why? Because you want to follow a shaykh who has less mistakes. And it's necessary that the one who speaks more will make more mistakes. And the one who speaks less will make less mistakes. That's just necessary. Why is it necessary? Because every time you speak, you're putting yourself in a position in which you can make a mistake. Every time you speak, you put yourself in that position. So the one who does it more is putting himself in that position more. The one who does it less is putting himself in that position less. So the likelihood of the one who speaks a lot of making mistakes is far more than the likelihood of the one who doesn't speak that much making mistakes. So you want the one with less mistakes. So, and that's why they didn't used to speak. The early ulama, they didn't used to speak. They stay away from speaking. Even when it's necessary. Oh, with students, yeah. But that's it. We have a set class. You come, we think. And if you notice how the ulama teach, is very tight. They don't go out. Yeah. You don't find them going on in tangents and stuff like that. Real ulama, they stick very closely to what they have. We have this one hadith, let's go through it. Word. They're done with that. They don't go on about it. So, they don't speak. They remain, and if there's somebody else who can do it, they're happy. Even with fatwa. Right? And fatwa is necessary. It's necessary to clarify the religion to people. Even then, if there's somebody who can do it and I don't have to say it, they're happy with that. And so a question would bounce around. Abu Rahman ibn Abi Layla, he said that I would see a question bounce around 100 companions, 200 companions of the Prophet ﷺ, because nobody wants to be the one to speak about it. So you go ask one, as long as they'll say, go ask that. And then that one say, go ask that one. That one say, go ask that one. Only if the question comes back to the first one, then he'll answer, because nobody else is answering the question. But to jump at the opportunity to say something about the religion, it's so dangerous. It's so dangerous. So dangerous to speak about the religion. فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. Then the Prophet ﷺ continued in the hadith, وَمَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ, and whoever believes in Allah and the last day, فَلْيُكْرِمْ جَارَهُ, then honor or let him honor his neighbor. Honoring your neighbor means, first of all, that you preserve his secrets. Preserve the secrets means everybody has an awra. There are different types of awra. Awra means that which should not be seen by others. So the famous one that we know the word for is awra of the body that must be covered in salah and stuff like that. But awra means that which should be kept hidden from others. That's what the awra means. So the Muslim has different awrat that must be honored. One is the body. So you're not supposed to see the part of the body that should be covered of a Muslim. If you don't have a sanction from the Sharia to see it, you're not allowed to see it. Same thing for the awra is the home. The awra of every Muslim is his home. His home, his house. What that means is, unless you have a permission from the Sharia to see what happens in the house of a Muslim, you're not permitted to see. That should be hidden. But neighbors will have access to what should be hidden much more than other people. You might hear an argument, for example, right? You might see through a window when you don't mean to. These type of things. If these types of things happen, when the Prophet said, "Yukrim jarahu," the first thing is that should be kept secret. If you hear your neighbors fighting, the first thing should not pick up the phone and call someone, "Hey, you should hear what's going on." No, that should never ever be told. That should die with you. Why? Because you're not supposed to know what happened. It just so happened that you heard it because they couldn't control their voices. So it's not like if you got wind of something you should not know, then keep it secret. So honoring your neighbor means keeping the secret. That's the first thing. Keep the secrets of your neighbors. Whatever you happen to see, don't speak about it. It also means to share what you have with them. Sometimes that can be wajib, sometimes it's mustahab. It's wajib when it's daruri. If your neighbor is going to go hungry to a point where it threatens their body, then you have to share if you have something to share. That's not optional. You have to. But most of the time it's mustahab. So honor your neighbor, keep their secrets. Share what you have with them. Never desire what they have. In other words, don't be envious of what they have. Look at the car that your neighbor has and you want that from them. Or anything. So don't want the things that they have. Meaning don't be jealous. Don't be envious. Envious means you want it to be taken away from them so that you can have one like it. But if you want something like that, then make dua. So Allah increase them and give me like them. Something like that. So that way you're not wishing anything, or you're not, the evil eye, the Prophet says, "Wal ainu haq." You're not doing that to them. You're making Allah grant me what they have and increase them. Give them barakah in what they have. Things like that. So share what you have. Don't want what they have. Protect them from any harm. Protect your neighbor from harm. Which means that if you see somebody's like a thief is going to go into your neighbor, you're obligated to protect them. That's your neighbor. Call the cop, do something. Or don't protect your house and leave their homes vulnerable. You see a flood coming. Those slow floods? So it starts, you can see it coming. Don't go and start to fortify your house and leave your neighbor's house. At least inform them so that they can come out and do something. But don't, look out. Protect their stuff from harm. So, honor their secrets. Share. Don't covet what they have. Protect them from harm. And then bring whatever benefit you can to them. The Prophet ﷺ emphasized a lot on the honor that we need to give to our neighbors. Even the Prophet ﷺ himself said that Jibreel would come and emphasize the rights of a neighbor so much that I thought he would eventually say that the neighbor would inherit from you when you die. That's how much. And from the Salaf, there's a lot that they did in order to honor their neighbors. There's a lot of stories about Malik ibn Dinar, radiallahu anhu, and they said that his neighbor was a Jewish man, and his bath was near to the wall of Malik ibn Dinar. And so a lot of the najasa, not even just water, the najis water from the bath of the neighbor would come into Malik ibn Dinar's house. And he wouldn't complain. He would clean it up every day. Clean it up, clean it up, clean it up. He didn't even tell the neighbor, your thing is bothering me. It comes, he cleans. And then after a long period of doing this, the neighbor found out that this is happening. And then found out that it's not only happening, has been happening for a long time. So he asked Malik ibn Dinar, "Why didn't you say anything?" And Malik ibn Dinar quoted a hadith to him about the honor of a neighbor. And he accepted Islam and became a good Muslim because of that. There's Malik ibn Dinar, another story about Malik ibn Dinar, radiallahu anhu, said he had a rat problem with his house. And he complained to some people about the rat problem and how to take care of the problem. So somebody told him, get a cat. You have a rat problem, get a cat. I don't even know if that's true. It's famous, but I really don't know if it's true. Cats sometimes are afraid of rats. But somebody said, get a cat. He said, no, I don't want to get a cat. Why? Because he said the cats will chase the rats. And the rats may flee to the neighbor's house. It might help me, but then now my neighbor has a rat problem. So that's the extent that he was thinking about. Yeah, I might solve my problem, but it might cause my neighbor harm. And we can't do it. We're there to honor the neighbor, not cause the neighbor's harm. So all of that we got to think about. If we have an insect problem, you got to think about what's the best way to deal with it. Right? If we find the nest and we spray it and we chase it, then all the roaches might run to the neighbor's house, especially if we have these apartment buildings. But if you bring in those pest companies that put the poison in your house and the insects come eat it and they die in your own, that's better. Might be more expensive, but it's better. Why? Because you're not chasing your insect problem to other people's houses. You're dealing with it within your own, just out of consideration for the neighbors. Not to make noise at certain times, not to these type of things. The ulama, they say that if you cannot afford to buy for the neighbor, you can't buy something for the neighbor. If you can afford, even just something, if you buy for yourself, you give it to them. But if you can't, then he said, sneak it into your house. So that the neighbor doesn't have to see that you have it. Because if they see it, they might want it, you don't have anything to give. That's causing harm. That's how the Salaf used to think. If you buy something for your kids, and your neighbor also has kids, and don't let your kids eat it at home. Don't even let them see it in the garbage. Stuff like that. Just out of respect for the neighbors. These are all mustahab. It's also important to remember this is mustahab. It's not wajib. It's not wajib. Also when the Sharia has its own stipulations, because the Sharia looks at what is halal and what is haram. So when we say about making noise and stuff, we're not talking about what is permissible and what is not permissible. We're talking about what is mustahab. In terms of what is permissible by Sharia, you can make noise. It's permissible. If your neighbor, for example, is putting up stuff in his house and he's drilling and hammering and it's causing problems to you, you can't say, oh, they're doing something wrong. No, by Sharia, it's correct. He has a right. Because if we say you can't do that, then by the Sharia standards, we have no right to limit somebody else's tasarruf, yani what he can and cannot do with his own property. One of the things about ownership is what? Ownership over something means you have the right to use your property however you want. It's yours. Otherwise, what's the meaning of owning it? So if he owns his house, he can drill whenever he wants. He can put up whatever he wants. He can hammer his walls whenever he wants. If we tell him no, then we're imposing upon his ownership. And the Sharia doesn't allow you to impose on the ownership of people. But we're just saying, mustahab. It's mustahab. Send your neighbor. If you're going to hammer, send him. Say, look, we got to do some work tomorrow. It's going to make some noise. We're going to try to be from 9 to, from 9 to 12, we're going to try to finish within that time. Give them warning. If you can be out of the house is good. If not, we'll make some noise. Sorry about it. Just show them that, oh, we have some consideration. We're not just imposing ourselves. Stuff like that. So, فَلْيُكْرِمْ جَارَهُ. In the Shafi'i school, jar, a neighbor, is anyone within 40 houses from any direction. That's your neighbor, according to the Shafi'i school. And the fuqaha, they say every direction. In our times, we might include upwards and downwards in that. I haven't seen any of the fuqaha who mentioned it explicitly. You always want to be very careful if you haven't seen the fuqaha mention something. But in our time with vertical building, it's possible that if you're in the middle here, then you have 40 down and 40 up, that's your neighbors. If that's the case, if the fuqaha would see it that way, then the next building are not really your neighbors by law. right? So if you have two big buildings, wide and tall, and you're here, you have 40 and 40, and then the next building begins, that next building is not your neighbor according to the Shafi'i school. Could be, not according, it might be, if the fuqaha look at the type of neighborhoods we have now, that might be something that they'll say. Because it's 40 houses away. According to other madhabs, it's not 40 houses. There are differences among the ulama, to the point where some scholars say, some of the fuqaha say that your neighbor is anybody who's within the same city or same qarya, same village. However, villages back then and countries back then were simpler, smaller. Buildings were not as complex. Populations were not as dense. So, might be easier those times than to say that now. Because, for example, if somebody say your neighbor, if somebody says you're living in KL, everybody in KL is your neighbor. It's like, what, every 20 million people my neighbor? So, in the Shafi'i school, 40 houses away. We'll end with a statement from Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah ta'ala. Sufyan al-Thawri is one of the early fuqaha, one of the early mujtahid imams of the ummah. His madhab didn't live on, but he was a mujtahid. Also, he's one of the great spiritual fathers of the ummah, in terms of the Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah. And then the reason we're mentioning this statement is because Sufyan al-Thawri is saying that sleeping while your neighbors are hungry has a big spiritual impact. So Sufyan al-Thawri said 10 things kill the heart spiritually. 10 things kill the heart spiritually, makes it hard. The 10 things he said, number 1 is making dua for yourself and not for others, not for your neighbors, parents, and and the Muslims. Every time you make dua for the Muslims. For your parents specifically, for your neighbors specifically, and for the Muslims in general. Some of the ulama, they say, you should end your dua by saying, Allahumma ighfir li ummati Muhammad. Oh Allah, forgive the ummah of Muhammad. Warham ummata Muhammad. And have mercy on the ummah of Muhammad. Wa'fu an ummati Muhammad. And pardon the ummah of Muhammad. Wayassir li ummati Muhammad. And make things easy for the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yes, you can say it in your own tongue. So they say that this Ma'ruf al-Karqi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, whoever makes this dua, in every one of his dua, will be written among the awliya of Allah Azza wa Jalla. Whoever makes this, whoever makes this dua, in every dua that he makes, will be written among the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the first thing. Making dua for yourself and not your neighbors, parents, and the ummah. The second thing that he said kills the heart is learning the Quran and not reciting, he said, 100 verses daily. What other ulama mention is a wird daily. Wird means any portion that is regular. They didn't specify 100, but at least have some portion of the Quran that you're going to regularly recite. When I say portion regularly, not a regular part, but the amount of ayahs, a regular portion. I'm going to read 4 verses every day, 3 verses every day, 10 verses, something like that. Sufyan al-Thawri said, learning the Quran but not reciting 100 ayah every day is something that kills the heart. The third, he said, entering the masjid and not performing the tahiyyah al-masjid. Entering the masjid and not performing the 2 rak'ah is something that kills the heart. Not doing the tahiyyat al-masjid is something that, because if you can't, in the Shafi'i school, if you can't, for whatever reason, not enough time, whatever, you replace it by saying, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, Wallahu Akbar 4 times. The fourth thing that he said that kills the heart is passing by the Muslim graveyard and not giving salam and not making dua for them. We know the dua for Salam alaykum ya ahl al-diyar rahimakumullah wa inna insha'Allah bikum lahiqun. Or that, and then after is yaghfirullah lana wa lakum. To give salam to the dead. The fifth, he said, is entering a place on the day of Jumu'ah and then leaving the place and not performing Salatul Jumu'ah. Traveling, starting your travel on Friday after Fajr, entering a place and then leaving the place and not performing Jumu'ah. In the Shafi'i school, if you travel after Fajr on Friday, after Fajr, then you have to pray Jumu'ah. You have to pray Jumu'ah in the place that you're traveling to. If you want to travel on Friday and be exempted from Jumu'ah, you have to do it before, you have to start the journey before Fajr. According to the Mu'tamad of the Shafi'i school. Huh?
Regardless of the distance.
No. Once you become travel distance. So to begin a travel, when we say the word travel, we are including in it the distance. Because that's when it becomes a travel by law. That's according to the Mu'tamad, according to Imam al-Nawawi. According to Imam al-Rafi'i, you have to start the travel midnight on Thursday, before midnight. Otherwise, because it's haram to start the travel on Friday, unless there's necessity. If it's necessary, then you have to. But if you can't, if you can schedule it otherwise, then you shouldn't schedule a travel on Friday if you know you're going to miss Jumu'ah. If you know you're going to catch Jumu'ah, no problem. But if you know you're going to miss Jumu'ah, then you have to start the journey before Fajr. So, I don't know what is the fiqh of Sufyan al-Thawri as it relates to traveling on Friday. That's why I'm saying this is the Shafi'i school. Sufyan was a mujtahid, but he's mentioning here entering a place on Friday and leaving without performing Jumu'ah is something that kills the heart. The sixth thing that kills the heart, he said, knowing that an alim is visiting your place and making no effort to try to learn something from him. This is something that has a spiritual impact on the heart. You hear that an alim is visiting your locality and you made no effort to try to learn something from him. The Prophet ﷺ in the hadith said, Jalisu al-ulama. It's a command. He said, sit with the scholars. And he tried to sit with scholars. Just sit with them. You learn something. Because these are inheritors of the Prophet. So in the same way, if the Anbiya are coming around, right, you try to sit with the Anbiya because they're there to give you guidance. Ulama are also the same. They're extending. By extending, mean they're carrying on the mission of the Prophet ﷺ. So sit with them. You might learn something of your religion. And of course, this applies to real ulama. Proper ulama. Even if just, you get the point. If somebody who's just considered an alim but is not an alim, you don't really have to sit with them. In fact, it's better not to. Because you don't want to continue that delusion of them thinking they're ulama. But real ulama, if you don't make an effort to sit with them, this is something he said that can kill the heart. Meeting someone and not asking his name. That's the seventh. Meeting a Muslim and not asking the name of that Muslim. The eighth is to tell a person that you'll accept his invitation but then not showing up. Somebody meets you, say, come over XYZ, we're having whatever, and they invite you. You say, yeah, I'll come. And then you don't show. For no reason. If there's a reason, no problem. But in other words, to pretend to tell somebody that you're going to accept their invitation when you're not really serious is something that kills the heart. And he said, wasting your youth and not learning any ilm or adab. When you're young, to not try to get as much knowledge and adab, to inculcate ilm and adab at that time, is something that kills the heart. And the last one, and this is the point that where it's relevant to what we're talking about, is sleeping satisfied while your neighbor is not. So it usually talks about hunger, but in general, like to sleep on a comfortable bed when your neighbors have to sleep on the floor, or on a full stomach when they are hungry, or in safety while they are unprotected, or with comfort in terms of your mental comfort because you don't have anything to be bothered with, but you know your neighbor has a problem that's preventing them from sleeping that you can help out with, and you're not helping. Even if just to comfort them, just to offer some comfort. Somebody's going through some problem with his job and he's worried about it, and you know that's... So to go sleep when you have job security, stuff like that. Just the whole idea is to live your life without any concern, selfishly, without thinking about your neighbors, while they have things that you could help out with, is something that kills the heart. We'll continue with the hadith in the next session, inshallah. Ninth, and not learning any knowledge or adab during that time. هذا وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.